Banks were rule-based, right? And they were like, okay, we only need to disburse this much. They had their targets, and they'll say we need to do this much, and therefore we'll only, cater to these many people. If you fit within that criteria, then it's fine. Otherwise,
You don't get credit.
yeah.
Hi everyone, welcome to season 2 of Finance Forward, where we talk about finance, accounts, and everything that counts. Today, Pratham and I are speaking to someone really special. She and her co-founders have built a $500,000 entity within 8 years. Please welcome Ms. Priya Sharma of Zestmoney. Priya, thank you so much for being with us on this podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. My pleasure.
Why don't you walk us through your journey really quickly?
Sure. Obsessed. Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Start from the MBA.
So, journey of Zest actually started in London. I was doing my MBA at the London Business School. There, I got fascinated by finance and moved into investment banking. I went through the whole financial crisis there. I had joined Merrill Lynch, which got merged into Bank of America. So, I saw that whole transition. And at that time, I was actually working on some media and telecom and technology deals. I got to meet some entrepreneurs who were either fundraising or trying to sell their company, and I started getting really excited and fascinated by that. And I did that for about 3 years, and then I decided to move on. And then I was thinking, what should I do with my life? And that's when I started to gravitate more towards startups, and I felt that maybe I should find a job in a startup or a technology company. And I found this company called Wonga in London. They were one of the, at that time they were, they could do no wrong actually. They were the largest startup in London at that time. They had started expanding into other countries. They were a South African, and British company, and they were into, financial service. At that time, actually, it wasn't called fintech. It was just, they were just a tech startup. They said that if you read about them, you met the founder, and the vision was that to disrupt financial services, right?
Okay.
And the idea that he had was that financial services will go the way that e-commerce and media had gone, which is that move completely online.
Yeah.
So financial services at that time, and this I'm talking about 2011, in London. So we were just very early in the journey. Smartphones had just started. They were beginning to become more and more popular. And yeah, the word fintech actually had not been coined or was being coined around that time. And I met the team and I met the founder and was really blown away by this vision that everything will be on the mobile. Everything will become an app.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually the genesis of fintech, that how do you take a traditional financial services product onto your mobile? So they were a lending company. They had automated lending in 15 minutes. Money was in your bank account. They were hugely popular in London. So I joined them. They were looking at sort of international expansion. And that is where I met my, who became my co-founders later, Lizzie and Ashish joined a bit later. And Lizzie and I became the Wonga India team because, they said, oh, you're Indian, and why don't you go and figure out what we can do in India? So I landed here in Mumbai. Ironically, I had not been in Mumbai much, so I wasn't very familiar with Mumbai. I had actually never worked in India before and never really examined the Indian market before that, so this was really interesting for me. I didn't know what an NBFC was. And I remember Lizzie had joined, I think, a few months before me. And she's like, oh, we need to set up an NBFC in India. And I'm like Googling and, figuring out what an NBFC is. So, yeah, that is how, we met. And our job was to understand the market and see whether or not we could launch a consumer, credit product in India. So that was effectively the brief that we were given. And we were evaluating, multiple options, and we used to scan the market, go meet people. And that's actually how our idea, began. So at Wonga, then I ended up so both Lizzie and I, we set up the NBFC finally. We set up a team, and then Ashish had also joined in London, and, we were looking to launch a product in India. But then they started having issues at their end, and then we all three decided to move on and things like that. And then this idea had stuck, especially with me and Lizzie, that, we felt that there is a need for disruption in credit in India. We had studied, how the other markets had been evolving and what were the other products in credit, right? So we started focusing on credit. We looked at SME, consumer, many different models. And we said, actually, the model that we had in mind is still relevant. No one is doing it. We knew everything about it. And then suddenly the Paytm large funding happened.
Yeah.
And I think in India, I would say that was the beginning of...
This is 2014, 2015.
End of 2014.
Yeah.
And I was in London, Lizzie was here. And I was like, what am I doing, right? Like we know this, we understand fintech, the opportunity is there. We felt that, this Paytm funding was huge. It was game changing. We had been involved in some of the Aadhaar and, some of those discussions that were happening here. And we felt, that it was just us. We were just being, I guess, risk averse. And so we said, why are we not doing this? Let's do this. So let's just take the plunge and we'll see what happens. And let's at least launch this product.
Yeah.
In credit. So that's actually how we started. So in August 2015, we had raised our first, round before even a piece of code was written. So Lizzie and I, went to San Francisco and we met our, seed investor, Ribbit Capital. We met them and, they had known us for some time actually. And we had the full sort of business plan, the blueprint, everything that we wanted to do. And they said, yes, this is the biggest opportunity and, credit is huge in India. India is huge, credit is huge, financial services worldwide is huge, so let's do this. That's how we started. And it's been 8 years. I think life has come full circle. But we are very proud that we were one of the pioneers in consumer credit. We built a product that, no one had actually imagined at that time, obviously. And also it's, I guess, in the end, we had a lot of competitors, but I guess that's testament to the fact that we built something that works and people thought was interesting. So it was a good journey. We scaled and quite a lot of customers and built
I'm sorry, Priya,
so
before you explain the growth aspect, you studied in your undergraduate, you said software engineering. Then you went into MBA in finance. So you have at least a pedigree combination of tech and finance, right? So just before we jump into the details, if you can tell all of us, including our audience, what really fintech is in 30 seconds. And you said there was the blueprint was ready, right, for Zest. So what was the model? What exactly did Zest do? And then we'll jump into the growth story.
Yeah, so I think fintech to me is effectively bringing financial services onto your fingertips. I think, because financial services, banks, they all use technology for maybe 20, 30 years, right? And every bank has a lot of complex technology and they actually spend a lot on technology. And there were other companies that would be more at the back end and there'd be maybe data processing and things like that. I think fintech to me is when it moved out of just the banks and it was brought onto your mobile. And in a way, there were these companies or, our companies, we started competing with the banks and the NBFCs in that sense. And this is worldwide, right? So Revolut, for example, they are a neobank. It's a completely digital bank with no branches, right? So that to me is fintech, where it was a completely digital first experience. And it was, again, different from how we saw financial services being delivered to the consumer versus earlier where it was, the bank was still the front and it was something at the back end and things like that. So it's a bit long-winded.
No, it's fine. And also there were a lot of terminologies, whether you talk about, when you say financial services, that's also quite broad, right? Very broad, yeah. So again, Zest was focusing specifically on consumer credit. What was the niche you all picked?
So we focused on consumer credit. As I said, it started because we were in this company called Wonga and they wanted to launch something in consumer credit. So effectively that became our starting point. But when we were evaluating things on our own, we felt, yes, consumer credit we felt was very interesting in the Indian context. This is my favorite stat that I love. I've been tracking this since 2011. In India, today there's roughly 900 plus debit cards in issuance, which means that there are 900 plus bank accounts. but there are just about 50 to 60 million credit cards in issuance. So versus anywhere else in the world where you see credit card penetration a lot higher.
What is the typical credit card penetration?
So I mean, in developed world, it can be up to 75%, right? So
we
depending.
have the margin of going all up to 600 million when we're about 10% of the market, 15% of the market.
Exactly. And that too, I mean, the 60 million is, if you looked at the unique customers who have access to credit cards, that's probably only about 20 to 30 million.
Okay.
So the access to consumer credit is very, very limited. In fact, access to credit in general is very limited. If you picked home loans, that's available to a certain segment of society. If you picked, auto loans, I would say is still higher penetration because again, it's it's a fixed amount and it's they take the security of the vehicle. So in auto and home, I think the penetration is slightly higher, but it's still not available as easily as everywhere else in the world. When you look at credit card, and I use credit card as a proxy because it's a very easy credit, right? And it's for your daily use. And it's cash flow management. In the rest of the world, credit cards are used primarily as cash flow management, that you put all your expenses on your credit cards and then you pay your bill at the end of the month or you roll over, whatever. Here, I think we found that banks and financial institutions were just not willing to extend any sort of credit even to their own customers. Right. So the fact that I brought out the bank account, point, like they have a bank account. They may have a bank account with XYZ bank, but only, 10% of those people in the same bank are being extended
So
credit.
I have a question here. I have spoken to my bankers and they have often told us that if you have 10 crores in your account, that does not mean that you're still eligible for a 1 crore line of credit also. They want to see rolling income coming again.
Yes.
What is the reason for this?
So I would say that's a perfect example of rule-based credit analysis, right? So someone has decided that, you need to see this much income, and even if you have 10 crores, but I need to see recurring income of,
Which makes less sense.
Exactly.
I have the money.
You have the money, so why won't you extend money on the back?
So you guys were trying to revolutionize.
So we were trying, our fundamental thesis was just because so the other thing that started happening in India is that, there was the credit bureaus were set up around 2005, I think the Credit Bureau Act came. So then the bank started putting data in the credit bureau. So then, because of this rule-based, credit assessment, another rule that started happening is that if you don't have a credit history, then you won't be eligible for a credit card. And if you don't have a credit card, you won't have a credit history, right? So it's a chicken and egg problem. And so who will break that? Who is the one who's going to take that first leap of faith on you? It's like in a job as well, right? Like, you're applying, everyone's asking for experience. So who gives you the first job? And if you think about it from a customer perspective, if they need a job, like I'm just using this job analogy, that person will be forever loyal to you. They will always remember that, you gave the first break, and then they may move on to other things. And so we felt that why can't it be like that, right? Like just because you are not creditworthy, or, you may not have felt the need for credit. So the other aspect that we realized was, firstly, banks were rule-based, right? And they were like, okay, we only need to disburse this much. They had their targets, and they'll say, we need to do this much, and therefore we'll only, cater to these many people. If you fit within that criteria, then it's fine. Otherwise,
You don't get credit.
Sorry, And the other aspect is that the consumer is the demographic has changed, right? So much younger, on mobile, as we know today. I mean, they're always on mobile. In India, we definitely still have a savings mentality. Our parents' generation, they definitely did not trust financial services and definitely did not trust, credit cards. So there is definitely, I would say, in India,
Where's the breaking out of that mentality?
we're beginning to break out. And actually, that's the other point, that we felt that consumers are beginning to break out. That our parents' generation,
So when you're starting up, is it because you felt or because it was actually data showing you?
I'd say more gut, more intuition. We didn't have enough data.
So to summarize the model of Zest, at least the beginnings, you were basically you were extending credit to individuals who did not have the credit history, or
Yeah.
banks would essentially not lend credit to, and you targeted the segment that was just sort of reaching the point where they needed credit.
Correct.
This is more or less what you
Yeah.
started with.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think just to add, yeah, so I think you summarized it better. The other thing we realized is that, we felt that everything was moving online and everything was going to go digital. And we said that, yeah, credit that is customized, it is customized to the needs of the customer and completely digital, end-to-end digital, which I think in
Which is basically what fintech is about.
which is what fintech is about.
My next question probably is, can you explain to us what your pioneering product, which is basically your tagline after a point of time is BNPL, which is
Yeah,
buy now,
buy now, pay later, yeah.
What does it stand for?
Yeah. So it's just credit for your, shopping online or offline. So, we are offline as well. So it's just credit actually. So,
So you're giving credit to people,
We are
and
giving
they
credit
can buy
to-
right now, they can pay you guys later.
Yeah.
So, this is
In
also the
installments.
concept of a credit card, right?
yes. So
Why would we want to reinvent the wheel if credit cards were there?
So great question. So when we say buy now pay later, the structure was also that you pay back in installments,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is actually different from credit cards. So in credit cards,
that makes sense,
it's a card, you shop on it, and then you have to pay back in full in 30-40 days, or then you roll over, right? Now, in the 2007-2008 crisis, I think the world realized that the rolling over of debt was
Is
very
what is dangerous,
is
yeah.
very dangerous, right? And what we realized is that if a customer, really needs credit, then they would like the opportunity to actually split that over 3
Yeah, that
months,
makes more sense,
6 months, right? So buy now pay later is actually an installment product.
So you turn the credit into more of a loan for the customer, right? Like even in our industry, when I don't know if most people who go overseas for MBA, they take loans from the bank. That's a typical loan. But if you want a smaller ticket size of a loan, and you don't have credit history, then this becomes your option, and you can pay over the same period of time that a normal. Okay, got it.
So I think that was the other thing.
Yeah.
And then we also realized that, in India, card we felt, and now it all sounds like, we were all right. But we felt, and this is 2014, 2015 when we were conceptualizing Zest, that, cards were maybe not the right form factor for India.
Yeah.
They, the Visa and MasterCard networks, they were foreign networks. RuPay was, just being introduced. And we felt it was very expensive. And we felt that maybe a mobile-based wallet or mobile-based form factor was better. And so our tagline initially was kill the car. Then we said, okay, let's, tone it down a little
So
bit.
I would question you, how does Visa and MasterCard make money?
Yeah.
Because, everyone's essentially thinking that they have a lot of money,
Yeah,
which they
they
can dole out
Yeah.
whenever the consumer wants. And how would Zest make money?
Yeah. So Visa and MasterCard, they make money on what is called as interchange, right? So
Interchange.
Yes. So payments worldwide, customer is usually not paying. So if you have your debit card or your credit card, the merchant is being charged as MDR, merchant discount rate.
Okay. Which is typically 1 to 2%.
1 to 2%, right? Which UPI is zero, right?
Okay.
So which is why the UPI adoption has been so amazing, and it's good for the merchant, because here in India the merchants are micro merchants, versus in the US or in the developed world, merchants are large merchants and they are okay paying fees, right? So this concept of MDR or merchant discount rate, and that being, it can go up to 3% in certain cases.
Okay,
So that fee, typically the merchant pays, and then that fee is then split between the various players in the chain. So even your, the machine that is there, and then your, the card rails, which is your Visa, MasterCard, and then, the issuing bank, and there might be a few other, layers. So this is actually quite a complex, system, which actually, UPI, if you think about it, cuts all of that, right? So it's cut out
direct.
It's direct. It's the
But
rails.
UPI doesn't give you credit.
Well, now they are, in the sense that so UPI is rails, right? So similar as Visa and MasterCard. So it's a protocol. It's like, literally rails is the way to think
So
about it.
let me just frame the question, and then it's the same, just so that everyone has context. So a usual credit, what people think of credit as, especially from banks, right? So credit card, what Zest was doing UPI, right? If you can just lay out the differences.
So UPI is a payment rails. It's a payment network, right? That is been conceptualized and run by the NPCI. And what is happening is that the money is going directly from my bank account to your bank account, and you may be a person or you may be a merchant. But the underlying protocols and the give and take is being monitored and administered by NPCI. And then there are the apps, which is your Paytm, your PhonePe, and any other app, right? And it's interoperable, so the same QR code can be scanned by anyone.
Yeah.
So similar to that, Visa, MasterCard are the rails, right? So when you're
Rails is a network.
Rails is a network, right? So when because think about it this way, it's when you're scanning the code, there are few pieces of information that you're getting, right? So like who is the merchant, which basically means where is the payment going for, what is the amount, what is, and so in UPI, you usually have these two. In the Visa, MasterCard, you have other things like what is the merchant code, is it a credit or a debit?
Yeah.
So in UPI right now, it's only debit. So this is just the rails, the rails have been set up. Now the question comes, okay, is it coming directly from your bank account or is someone else paying and then you have to pay them back? So if someone else is paying and then you have to pay them back, that's effectively credit, right? So whereas if it's coming directly from your bank account, like if you went to your bank account and it sees your money like getting debited or that amount, that's debit. There is no credit involved. Which is instant, and it's no, you don't have to pay anyone back, like that transaction is done. The difference between credit and debit is, and credit is an interest. Okay, so credit is what is credit, right? So the definition of credit is that anything where you got your service or physical good right now and you are paying later. It could be 1 day later, it could be a month later.
Just not at that time. Something.
Just not at that time. That is credit.
So buy now, pay later.
Buy now, pay later is credit. So that is actually the definition of credit. Even your phone bill, right? Like you have this concept of prepaid or postpaid, right?
Yeah.
What is postpaid? Postpaid is credit,
Yeah.
right? Because they said, what are they doing? They are basically saying, you are good for using my service, which is the phone network, for 30 days. We know that on average, you will, spend, you will talk so much, this is your data, blah, blah. On that basis, they're saying, okay, maximum, whatever, 500 rupees. And I know that this person will pay me back. That is what is credit, versus prepaid. Why is India a prepaid market? Because there is a lack of trust.
Yeah.
Because no one is taking that, or that judgment call is being taken on very few people. So India, actually, this prepaid versus postpaid concept, the first, mass credit in this country, I would say, was Airtel, because or not Airtel, the telecoms basically, because they said, in the rest of the world, prepaid is very small. Here in India, it's still, I guess 90%, I haven't looked at the data yet, but most of the population is still
That would
prepaid.
also be because of the fact that legality in India is
Yeah.
the legislation system overall,
Yes.
the judicial system overall has to improve.
Correct.
Imagine there are a lot of customers who say, I don't want to pay my loan.
Yes, absolutely. And so this is,
for banks.
Yeah, but is it because India is it the consumer problem? They'll end up defaulting and that's why it's not taken off, or it's the regularity, the regulations, the legality, which is the cause of.
okay, so there's always fraudulent consumers everywhere.
That's fine. But
That's
that would also
fine.
be a small percentage
Yes,
of it. Yeah.
right? And so what has happened because of that is because we haven't, as a country in general, built systems around protecting the rest of the population. Like when you build systems, you don't build like zero error systems, right? Like you know that there will be some error.
Yeah.
So as long as you know how to catch those errors or what to do, with those
It all
errors.
boils down to the
So it boils down to the entire system. So because see, the thing with telecom and even with buy now pay later or our product was that, we were on average doing 20,000 rupees and 30,000 rupees type of loans. You are not going to invoke, the legal system for that, right? So when we first, came up with the concept of Zest and we used to go and speak to banks, this is the same question they used to, but what are you going to do? Like, people are going to not pay you back, and what is the legal recourse? And our point was, okay, yes, there is, you have, from a documentation standpoint, you have to write all that and everything needs to be in your terms and conditions and all that. But when you're operating, you can't have that as
But
your,
this question is moot because credit
Yeah.
card company भी तो
they do the
वो भी
same.
same चीज होता है ना.
Exactly.
मतलब आप you guys are an alternative to credit card
Correct.
in a way.
Yeah.
The difference is their audience is going to they're going to the ones who the bank is not giving the credit card to, and that's why
It's easy
the
to get the loan.
it's easier, and they're giving the chance to people who banks basically don't.
Yeah, that was the original idea. All the Indian we were giving to everyone, and we were, what we call a super prime or prime as well. In
Yeah,
India.
yeah.
But our we just had fundamentally different philosophies, right? Like we said, first of all, just because you don't have credit or you don't have credit history doesn't mean you're not credit worthy.
Yeah.
So you should be every individual should be assessed on the basis of their finances.
So you basically opened up trust essentially. You were the one who started with
Yeah,
that.
and the way to open up trust is to trust
Give
people.
them the benefit that
right?
you will
Like
pay back.
if you are always risk averse and you don't do anything, then nothing's going to happen. Somebody has to start somewhere, right? So obviously our first, 6 months, we only did 100 loans. So, so it's not like on day one, we were like, come and take loans and, then we'll see what happens, right? So in the first 6 months,
We were beta testing at that point.
we were beta testing, we were like looking at what's happening, who are the first, I still remember, because we had been in concept mode for so long. And when we launched, and we were just sitting there and we launched, and I remember that, 30 seconds later, there was a customer who was like clicking on it, and we're like, wow,
Literally, as soon as you launched in a minute,
yeah,
people were on.
literally, there was a customer who started clicking on it. What is this Zest? He's looking at it, and he actually applied, and we're like, what do we do now? So these are the things. So obviously, we also went through our, journey of building our models, because if you don't have customers, then what models are you going to build, right?
So coming back to the origin. So now just converging where I had where we were. So the beginning journey, right? Just by the way, they launched in August 15. As I was saying, we are in September 15. Even the first two letters of our company names are the same.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So if you, and yeah, you're right. You said that y'all raised even before anything was sort of established. Please take us through that. And I know that in the initial few rounds, y'all raised over, I think, 11 million in Series A itself.
That's about what, 80 crores that thing.
Yeah, that's massive, right?
So how do you get people, I mean, to add to this question, how do you get people to trust you to give you to people who've not started up before or who've not had entrepreneurial background before?
Yeah. So definitely we were first-time entrepreneurs. I would say credit goes to the investors, who took the risk on us. But no, jokes apart, I think we had done a lot of homework, right? So I think this is my advice that I give to any entrepreneur or anyone who's looking to start up. You should have 100% or even more than 100% conviction in your idea. So we had spent, 3 years, we were entrepreneurs or, whatever, startup within a startup. So we had the good fortune of studying various models, looking at this particular model.
Oh yeah, you were in investment banking, so you must have even seen a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, both, actually Lizzie also similar, in finance.
Yeah.
She was an investor before. So we also knew, I knew how to make a business plan and business model and all that, right? So we had everything.
आपको investment banker को बनाना आता था.
हाँ, investment banking का
But
pitch,
still, 80 crores is a lot of money.
pitch बनाना आता था. हाँ, वो सब बनाना आता था.
Yeah.
I think the first round was easier. It was also, again,
Small round,
it was a smaller, it was also the boom. I think the subsequent rounds were more difficult, I would say, because then, the boom changed. So it was 2016 and it was a tough year that year for Indian startups. And as I said, our first 6 months, we only had like 100 transactions to show for actually, which then, like we don't have enough traction. We know that this is going to work, but it's not enough. We didn't even have a bad loan. So we're like, okay, are your models working or not? So I think the subsequent rounds were a bit tougher. I think, so first round easier. It was more on concept. It was the fact that they took a, call on the team, and the fact that we sort of knew, we knew what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Because it was pre-anything. I think the next 2 rounds were more difficult. It was more about, what we had built so far. So I would say on that piece, we definitely had built a good product. we didn't have enough traction. It wasn't kind of flying off the shelves initially. That was also
But you have to
because
educate the customer also.
we were creating the market. We were the first ones, and our go-to-market strategy was what we used to call as B2B2C. So we would, we didn't do any customer marketing. We would only be seen through a merchant. Merchants were, they had their own, if you're a Flipkart, then they were like, we want this and we want that, and so it was taking us time to, actually get into the large, networks. And so we were mostly with smaller merchants and
Sorry, when you say merchant,
Yeah.
just for the audience, you mean
Yeah.
sellers?
sellers as in
Shopkeepers, yeah.
e-commerce basically. So our initial strategy was that we would effectively enable credit for e-commerce.
Okay.
Because we also felt that, okay, so this, I don't think we covered this part. So because there was no credit cards or very few credit cards, and we said, okay, then how are people paying for their shopping online? Obviously, at that time, it was all cash on delivery, which was a massive issue for merchants and for customers. So our initial product was very much around e-commerce only. And yeah, so in fact, I don't think we thought of offline too much at that time. Only later we realized that actually India is completely offline and you can't ignore offline.
So when you say that you were, Flipkart and Amazon were your, how do I put it? They were the go-to players for you to take the kickoff, the launch of Zest, right? And I wanted to ask you that PayPal did the same thing. So PayPal was the first real digital financial services company in the world which was that popular. And I know I've read a lot about it saying that where they actually went to eBay, and because eBay was the biggest e-commerce player at that time and had majority of the transactions, they ensured that they became the payment provider for eBay. And that's how they really took off. That's when they started getting a lot of B2C customers, and when they reached large enough of an audience, eBay bought them out for 1.5 billion back in, I think, early 2000s. So any inspiration, anything related to PayPal when it comes to y'all also looking at e-commerce?
PayPal.
Yeah.
I had been, we hadn't studied the PayPal model for a long time, and ironically, PayPal had themselves got into credit a bit later, pre-2010, I think, and they had acquired this company called Bill Me Later, which I think was one of the first, online credit or
Buy now, pay later.
buy now, pay later type of models. And that deal was around 800, 900 million at that time. So I had always remembered that, and, that was definitely an inspiration for us. Klarna was another inspiration because Klarna is, again, 2005, is when they started. And obviously being in Europe, they had, done a very good job. And so those are inspiration, I think. Getting onto Amazon and Flipkart was something that we were obviously trying for from day one. But actually that move came later. First, what we were able to crack, and I think the biggest turning point for us was Xiaomi. And they then became
Invested elsewhere.
So Xiaomi at that time was in their expansion.
Penetrating in your vehicle.
Yeah.
And at that time they used to say they were the number 3 in e-commerce in India. Because sports was anyway the category that...
Now, okay.
So after Flipkart and
Amazon.
Yeah, and even on those two...
What transactions would they do in a year?
But that I don't remember.
Yeah, but you're right. Even on Amazon and Flipkart, phones, consumer electronics is the... Yeah.
Even offline, if you look at it, phones are the fastest moving item, right? So fashion and all were relative, and they were lower ticket size.
Correct.
Yeah.
We felt in phones, but obviously from a fraud perspective, it was tricky.
Yeah.
So Xiaomi was an interesting one. We did a custom build for Xiaomi, so actually spent a lot of time, and and they really got to know the team and all that, and that's when we then
They came in as an investor.
they came in as an investor. So that was our last Series A, as we call it. So, and then PayU also came in because again, they were in the payment space, and the idea was to work with them to distribute. So we were trying to work with payment aggregators, and Xiaomi was the first, I would say, large merchant that we got. And then after that, on the back of that is when we got the Flipkarts of the world.
Okay.
So it was a journey. It took us time. I would say the first 2 years, it took us a time to build our network.
Sure.
To build that because otherwise, why would an Amazon,
Correct.
put us on payment, and the payment page, the checkout page is the holy grail of e-commerce. Because you want the customer.
Everything,
They
yeah.
have like decided what they want to buy. They're at checkout. They just want to do one click so that for them the transaction gets completed and they make money. Now, if they put someone there, then it has to, it's success rate. So we have to work. Our product was positioned as a payment product, but it wasn't, because we were delivering credit. So credit is a more complex journey.
Right.
You had to go through KYCs and stuff like that, yeah.
KYCs, the customer didn't necessarily know. They were like, "Acha, now you're asking."
Aadhaar kyun chahiye?
Aadhaar bhi chahiye. Acha, Aadhaar ढूंढ के लाता हूँ.
Yeah.
All this friction was there.
Yeah.
So then, as a result of that, we also started modifying our strategy a bit. So then we said, okay, maybe we need to not be on this only B2B kind of model, B2B2C model, and we should have our own B2C strategy as well. And slowly we then started acquiring our own customers and saying that, you come to Zest, this is Zest, you finish all your process, and then you can go to an Amazon, Flipkart, and
So you would go to the edtechs of the world like ours,
so EdTech was another interesting category.
where people did not get a chance to, they didn't have credit history. Like we have our students who don't have credit history.
So perfect for us, right? So, and even with the students, we found that upskilling was a good one for us. So we didn't want, so we always, coming from the UK and having seen the UK regulatory landscape and all that, we always wanted to be a responsible lender. Because giving credit is very easy, and there's a demand for the product. But in financial services, we believe that you should not missell your product. So the customer should know what they're buying, that this is a loan. Like, if you do not pay back, there are certain implications. Whether you do the legal recourse or not, that's a commercial call, in my opinion. But the customer should know. They should know what the cost of credit is. They should know everything. So, we didn't want to go very, below 18, for example, and again,
Below 18%.
yeah,
No, 18 years.
18 years.
So we didn't do college students too much. So upskilling was an interesting one that we felt.
But again, they had no credit history.
They had no credit history. They were usually in their first job or second job, and they were, looking to upskill themselves so they could find a better job, right? So we felt, okay, this is a person who's wanting to invest in them, and it's a completely online journey. The checkout was online, and we had built our product in a way that it was plug and play into online checkouts, right? So we felt that EdTech was an interesting category. So we were at one point, we were 70-80% the EdTech in India. Obviously, the market at that time was very small. Now there are other players who have come in, but it was a good learning for us, good journey for us. So EdTech was very interesting.
Super. I want to ask you a little bit about what have you been the last 7-8 years of Zest? How much in total have you raised?
So in equity, about 140 million. Now it's 150 million, I would say. Yeah, roughly 150 million.
That's what 1,000 crores.
Yeah, plus then we used to have venture debt as well. So yeah.
Okay, so that would go up to.
So venture debt, maybe 20-30 million.
Okay, so again, roughly 1,500 crores is what you raised.
Yeah.
So I think Prasam's going to touch a little bit about CFO.
Yeah.
But how do you manage money overall?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to preface that question, right, our entire customer base are potential CFOs. Yeah. And from your co-founders, we've known that you were a really good CFO. You in the right way, you would hate spending, you would love saving, right? And as you were saying, right, in good times, in bull markets, the marketing heads really take over, but in tough times, the finance head takes over, right? So your mentality, whether it's when to be frugal, when to be aggressive, and also Zest is so regulatory heavy that again, as a CFO, you have that to really look at as well, right? Yeah. So your entire...
touching upon the CFO part, I think the primary job of a CFO is to maintain the business plan, right? So, and I consider myself more of a strategic CFO, less of, I'm not an accountant by training, so I'm not in the nuts and bolts.
We didn't agree with that.
Yeah, the course from you guys. And, but I'm not in the nuts and bolts of things, but the way, coming from my investment banking background, for me, it was always about the big picture and it was always about the business plan.
Right.
And in a way, that is what the investors were, looking at, from me. So from that perspective, I also looked at other aspects of, and so credit risk used to report it to me, collections, other things, other functions also, wherever money was getting majorly impacted used to report it to me. So personally, I think that's what the CFO should do. Like, you should look at all aspects and get involved in all aspects actually.
Yeah.
It is tough, and you do become very hated in the organization. Definitely, I think, some people I used to rub them on the wrong way and things like that. But I think as a CFO, your primary job is to know what is happening where and know where the money is being spent, but also know where the money is coming from, right? So understand your revenue sources, understand how to increase revenue. So one of the things that we realized is that, as we were growing, and I think a lot of startups in India go through this, that if you look at my original, business plan and the original, pricing model that I had done, we, went down significantly from there.
Yeah.
And I think this is true of India. I think everyone has ended up giving, so much discount because we were in this bull market and it was all about sort of customer acquisition and growth and all that. And then over the last year, we, slowly started looking at pricing, profitability, unit economics. I mean, we were looking at it, but that pressure was not there, or it wasn't enough. Focus wasn't there. I mean, me as a CFO and a finance team, we used to always look at it. We used to always think about it, but it's only when we started internalizing it across the company is that when those metrics actually.
But that's funny, right? Lizzie was telling us that y'all just closed some massive deal. Apparently, I think it was buying out. It was, yeah, and y'all had to fly to, I think, Chennai and you basically, with such valuations, with such money, you still took an auto from here to the airport because, like, no, we're not going to spend.
Yeah, it was Bandra, and then, Bandra to the airport, and I thought it's like...
Yeah. And in the auto, y'all were signing the papers and all.
Why spend so much money
on Uber?
Actually, this was pre-Uber, so at that time, Uber wasn't there. So, but we had, so we thought, okay, might as well just take an auto. But yeah, I mean, we've got many incidents like this.
But that's pretty good of an example for everybody, that you might have had close to 1,015 crores of money raised and in the bank, but you would not spend that extra 300, 500 rupees just because you could.
I mean, like business class, for example, right? Never took business class.
Yeah.
Travel, I think people just start traveling
exorbitantly,
and it is something that is started becoming very difficult to control.
Yeah.
So travel was something that, we always kept a very tight,
leash on, yeah. So is frugality actually one of the best attributes of a CFO?
I think so. I definitely think so. And I think people didn't like it, especially in the bull market. And also once we raised big rounds, right? Yeah. So in the early days, everyone's like, yeah, we get it. ठीक है. And then once you start growing, and then hiring is another one where, especially in the, the 2021, where salaries just skyrocketed, right?
Yeah.
And it was becoming very difficult and to hire people, to retain people. So at that time, then you have to also, it was very difficult for me personally, but I had to take that call that, okay, we have to give that raise, or we have to increase our base.
Yeah.
But you know that
you have to go back to the drawing board constantly, ensuring numbers maintain.
Yeah, but you know that's a hit on P&L, and it's not good.
But you take a buffer always, right? A good CFO would take a decent buffer.
It's not that easy because the market also shifts so rapidly, right? So then you have to constantly fundraise. So then,
For one of your aspects was fundraising.
Yeah.
Then it was keeping checks and balances.
Yeah.
And the other was ensuring that it's being spent wisely, capital allocation basically.
Yeah.
So a lot of startups would obviously have this problem that once you raise money, applying that to the business plan is difficult. So how would you allocate capital?
So a lot of that thinking should come through when you're bringing your business. So you should know that these are my, 3 core large buckets. And this is where, and mostly I would say in most Indian startups, team is large because of, everyone thinks that, we need large team.
Yeah.
Once you become a certain size and once you have a few, senior people, then everyone wants, I want 50 people, 100 people. So you have to constantly, why do you need 50?
Yeah.
So,
as if you remember before we started, I was telling you that one of the things that we had as our mentality was this whole start the business with zero capital. And it had not come from anything else, just basic, we had not seen maybe the valley side of it, or we sort of just launched Zelle when we had barely any experience, right? And We just didn't want to take from home essentially any money, and we didn't. Any people right now, and I think still, even in spite of this market, people still feel that raising, and if they do get the raise, that's more of an achievement than the beginning of a liability, right? Beginning of an obligation. And then it becomes really tough to justify that money because it's not always going to go as per the plan. And whatever you decided to raise the money for doesn't really, the ROI doesn't start the way you had put on Excel in the beginning.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Today, the entire discourse and everyone, has an opinion on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter, right? Or X as it's now called. I think raising versus not raising, I would say, firstly, it depends on your idea.
Yeah.
In my opinion. That, in your case, I think you were able to bootstrap and, you felt this was an idea that could generate sales revenue from sort of day one.
From customers itself.
Customer itself, and you knew that the customer would pay and you could build something. The second point here is that time is money and money is time, right?
Yeah.
So if you had chosen to raise, then, obviously you would have spent in customer acquisition, things like that. And so basically that you effectively say that I'm making an investment and I'm going to acquire X many customers. And then, but at a certain point then at this scale, my revenue is going to be higher than my costs and I'm going to, be profitable. And you just shortening that journey.
Correct.
Right? The second point in our case, for example, when we started, we were very clear that this is financial services. Financial services, needs some capital. Within financial services, it is credit. Yeah. Credit inherently needs capital.
Correct.
Of course.
The model is such. Yeah.
So we knew that we have to build up over time. We have to build balance sheet. If we are not building balance sheet, we have to partner with people who have balance sheets. How do people partner?
Plus, you were a tech company, right? That also required the investment.
Yes, it does. And I would say, because the discourse today is as big as change, right? So yes, tech requires investment, and definitely we took 3 months or so to go live. With, so we spent time working on the product and all that. But we knew from day one that this is a business model that needs money.
Yeah, sure.
And even today, I would say that we would continue to raise. If like this business model just needs money in debt equity, that's the game. Okay.
Got it.
Whereas even within financial services, Zerodha, for example, because they're a brokerage model.
Yeah.
And they're a pure platform. They may not need as much money because they're not putting capital.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right? So we were putting capital. That was our business model, fundamentally.
Sure.
Right? We said that we want to trust people, which means we want to give credit or we want to put skin in the game a little bit, right? So because we felt that, the traditional players were not taking enough risk, right? So the way we designed our business model was such that we needed money. Obviously, we were at a point at a scale where we were, quite actually close to profitability, and some of the units were, the metrics were moving. And again, it is a function of focus, and I think every business can get there, in terms of profitability. It is a function of focus and time. So for me, it's very simple. One is that if you go down this path, then you have to be very clear that for you what is the key ingredient for success? And what does success mean for you as an entrepreneur? If your business idea or business plan, needs continuous funding, or is it something that needs an initial, capital, and you should be very clear about it, right?
Yeah.
And then the path of, okay, we want to bootstrap versus, okay, I just need initial, 5 million, 10 million, and then I'm fine. So I think, but I would say when fintech is,
Unfortunately, it sucks money a lot.
Capital
financial
intensive,
services,
yeah.
because financial services is a fundamentally a relatively low, it's a scale game. Like if we look at the banks, if we talk about interchange, the money that they make is like 20, cents on the dollar, right?
Okay.
So you need scale. So to get scale, you need to invest. You need to invest in technology, and you need, consistent monitoring. So there's fraud, there's this, and, so there's a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
So it's a complex business model.
Yeah.
And in this model, I would say it needs money. It needs access to capital, either debt or equity. Even if you look at the NBFCs,
Correct.
reason why we have so many NBFCs, but they are all relatively small, is because they are capital constrained.
Yeah.
So if you look in India, it's from a financial services standpoint, I would say it's not a demand constrained market. It's a supply constrained market. There are, certain financial services of companies of scale, and those are listed, and they're very good and very well run. But then there are a lot of companies that are small. They just,
Yeah.
So I would say, so if it were, e-commerce or B2C, for example.
Got it. You didn't need so much capital to.
Then
like you needed a lot of capital to start up. You didn't require whatever works, basically.
And whatever works for you. But I think at the get-go, you should be clear.
I think what Pratham is saying that the mentality
Yes.
is now that the fundamental goal of businesses, a lot of businesses overall who are starting up, is that they think that they can get away, that the main achievement is getting the raise, which is not. It starts with the raise.
It's not, because I mean, the minute you get the raise, then there's the next board meeting. Like, okay, so and then see, then the other thing is that you have to then raise your next round, so you're always preparing for that. So I would say, as an entrepreneur, knowing your business plan.
And entrepreneurship in India is very difficult, right?
It is very difficult because there's so many things that keep happening, right? So Demon happened, then COVID happened, then obviously financial services, there's regulatory pressures, changes, there was the Yes Bank.
So you're looking at team, you're looking constantly at investors, you're looking at sales, consumers, the whole team is large. You're looking at regulation overall, which is again a massive problem.
Risk.
Management.
So I mean, these are just fundamentally, and you're constantly looking at your P&L, your numbers. These are 5-6 things which you're constantly looking at.
Yes. I think as a CFO and also a CEO, you in financial services, you have to look at all these.
Got it.
It's not just about, okay, is my money coming in, money coming out, but there's so many other things.
No, one of the things that you said was account, you not account. Do you firmly believe that account is generally helpful in CFO education?
I would say yes. I think having...
we have our next customer now.
I should actually. So my knowledge of accounting, I did get a little bit of it in the MBA. And then obviously when I was doing investment banking, then I was able to reading financial statements, understanding that, moving that into a financial model, because a financial model and accounting management statements, how to converge that. I think that was also interesting. But the basic accounts, systems management, auditing, for example, I haven't, done myself. But these are things that concepts I was able to pick up, even in my previous job and also through Zest. Definitely we had a very good team and we invested in the right systems also. I think I would say that people should, and we should have done more, I would say. And a lot of startups don't invest in systems. And especially when it comes to finance teams, because CFOs generally are tight-fisted. So CFOs don't invest in their own finance systems, which I think is not a good idea. You should. And there are loads of good softwares now out there that can help.
There's all of the world.
So
Good books and all of that.
Books and
Tally.
exactly all of them. So obviously Tally, I think now everybody uses. You can't live without it. So, and then the other thing is we always had good auditors. Also because we had that type of investors that we got. So as a result of that, there was always a focus on,
keeping everything clean.
That's in by.
It's always there. But there is no end to it. See, the other thing, the business moves so fast and the pressures are so much that you have to continually invest in it. So that, I think, it's not just about being frugal all the time. I think investment in systems is internal systems is very important.
So an anecdote about what happened in the US was that when Detroit, when car manufacturing or the car boom came, this is around the 1940s, 50s, everyone rushed to invest in the automobile industry. And it was an overflow of capital. And one of the a lot of people lost money. The people who were able to connect and execute it very well did decently well. Now, Do you think that is what is happening to fintech also in India? There are, I think, 6,000 fintech startups registered, and more than that. But then we play a safe, and then there are NBFCs. Then there are banks, the traditional money lenders. Do you think that the system overall at this point of time is also that there are too many people, and too many people are allowed to become fintech? I mean, there shouldn't be a constraint to business, but also too many people in the same place is just bringing a few of your down.
So, few things on this. Firstly, I think the demand is massive here, right?
The demand of credit in India.
Any sort of financial services in this country is massive. But to do something, at scale, you do need a lot of capital. So I do think that increasingly capital has gravitated towards the large players in fintech and in traditional also you can see that, the HDFCs of the world and, all of that. So definitely and similar things have happened in e-commerce and, other segments as well, where in the end you have, one or two or, maximum sort of 5 players, right? So if you look at large scale players, that's where I think it will end up. Smaller players will remain. I think the issue with too many small players, especially in fintech and financial services, is of regulation, which I think, in the NBFC world, they're all regulated, although I think the regulator would probably not, they always want more concentrated, right? Because it's easier for them to regulate, but at the same time have some bit of competition. So too many unregulated players, too many small players in fintech is actually not ideal, I would say, because it's the regulator is fine. We'll find it
The
difficult.
one thing you would change if you were a regulator would be for all fintechs.
This is a very
Teach
controversial.
consumers 0 to 1 of finance.
So that is one. Consumer education, and the RBI is doing a lot on that, right?
Even we are, yeah.
Yeah, even you are, and the other people also consumer, and we were also doing a lot of consumer education is definitely very important because a lot of times they don't even understand what is credit, what is debit, what does it mean, things like that. So consumer education is very important. Look, I mean, it's difficult to say that there should be blanket regulation or all those things are very controversial topics. But yeah, I think very small players. We are trying to have a self-regulating body, so that's one other thing that the...
What would you do if you were the regulator for a day? What would you want to change for the regulator for a day in fintech?
Wow, and that's a very tough...
I'm just putting you on the other side
Oh
now.
my God, that's a very, very controversial...
So let's see the other of that. So now
Stable regulation,
stable regulation, not too many changes.
consistent changes or moving in that direction.
Same direction, yeah.
Yeah, so stability of the system is what everyone requires. Yeah.
So I want to ask you one thing. It's a little sensitive. So there were a lot of things towards the end which we read about, the whole PhonePe, Zest bit. Now I know because we spoke earlier that a lot of things that were said were not true in the media. What are your opinions?
So there's a lot of conjecture, a lot of speculation, that has been put out there. I guess we, never commented on any of them.
This is a chance to comment on it.
No, generally, I think, we keep that stance. So, no comments. But yeah, I think definitely there's a lot of speculation out there.
And most of it's untrue.
But too much gets written, I would say.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But would most of it be untrue in that way?
I mean, hard to say.
So just from my end, right, as a concluding question, I wanted to just, we've also heard that you are quite strong at personal finance. Right now, whether you, it's with your accent or no, I don't know, but that's from the people around you, we've known about this, right? And personal finance is something that we believe is extremely important, supremely important, because no matter what age you are, no matter what sector you don't have to be a finance, your career doesn't have to be in the field of finance, in the domain of finance. You don't have to be a finance student, but you need to touch upon finance in your life, because whether you're in tech, whether you are in a public sector, whether you're just far away from finance, right, it affects all of us. Just your approach to personal finance.
Yeah. Firstly, I don't think I'm very good at personal finance.
Other people think you're good at
Other people think I'm good at... So I would say what my parents taught me, live within your means.
Yeah.
I think that I would say is definitely the starting point, right? And then secondly, then learn to invest and asset allocation, asset management, right? So within asset allocation, asset management, again, I'm not, I would say, great at it, and I'm learning actually. I would say a few things that I think make sense for me. Firstly, I do like reading a lot, so I read a lot about what's happening in the world, and I think that if you want to invest in equities, then you should be aware of what is happening in the world, and because the equity markets are definitely, they move, with the macro changes, and then they, their micro changes as well. So generally, if you are an investor in equity markets, then be aware of what is happening. There is some speculation, but there is some logic to it as well. So it's an art and a science. So at least have an understanding of it, and don't go by random, someone said this and therefore you should invest in tip wala nahi chalta hai. You should have an understanding of it. I think I read a quote from Warren Buffett that says that he invests in companies that he understands. I would say, I think that it's true for me as well. So I generally feel that I understand technology. So actually, if you look at most of my stocks or whatever I follow, it's mostly in this tech-driven. Which also, I would say, then the other aspect comes in that you should diversify, because obviously in the last 2 years, tech has dashed, and my is also tech, so I'm like fully into tech. So yeah, so diversification is another point that people should look at.
Yeah, and your personal finance philosophies, right? If they were to spill over into Zest essentially, right? How did that? Because I think that played a part of you being a CFO, your frugality, as well as if I talk about your market, right? If the entire country, we've heard of these stories that top athletes who became rich too early also blew up their money too early, right? They went bankrupt. And even if the entire Indian consumer base, they understand how to manage basic finances, it would basically solve a huge chunk of what you're trying to solve, which is help people get credit. The lack of trust goes away because people have higher faith that Indian consumers will repay, So whether you have a lot of money or you don't, right? But your philosophy is towards that, which also converge with Zest's.
I think my philosophy is that consumer education is very important. I'll just tell you an anecdote. The other day, I was at this conference in one of the IIMs actually, and a gentleman, came up to me and he said, "Oh, you spoke about finance, and the other day, someone sold me this some mutual fund, some policy, and now I'm left with nothing." And it's or the returns were not as good as and I won't even understand what these units mean. Like, what does it mean? 300 units or whatever. Even my dad, every time I'm home and he's like, "Oh, what is this? Let's go to SBI," and then you have to stand in queue and they'll sell you some stuff, right? I think consumer education is very important, and a lot of on the other hand, the financial institutions also, and in a way, a lot of the fintechs have been set up with that philosophy that, we want to keep the consumer first, right?
Yeah.
And solving for that consumer and explaining to them what it means, if this is a mutual fund, what it means. Is it risky? Is it not? Because usually in mutual fund, you just get that, standard, you all know what I'm talking about, and that comes, right? But people just don't understand it. Yeah. I think that education aspect is missing, and it's the onus is on the consumer to understand it, but the onus is also on the financial services provider to make sure that the customer understands what
before they buy it.
Before they buy it, right? So, what is a mutual fund? What are they investing in? Most of the mutual funds, the large caps, they are investing in the large.
The same problem in India happens with insurance as well. People don't understand it. Yeah.
Same problem with credit. People like, how much is the interest? It is going to is it going to cost me to, or what is it going to cost me?
Yeah.
The simple calculation people don't do.
Yeah.
They don't show you on the interest calculator that this is what it's going to cost you if you were to take a loan, if you're not taking a loan. And so I think, so my personal philosophy of Zest was that we should be transparent. In fact, this was one of our core values, that we should be transparent. And transparency in financial services, I think, is a very, big thing.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why, in fact, if you study the initial fintechs across the world, they really latched on to this to this transparency aspect because they felt that financial services has become so opaque. People don't understand it. The retail consumer, be it for any financial product, it is so difficult to understand.
I genuinely feel that there's a problem in the schooling system.
Yeah, I
think,
agree.
We taught a lot of things.
Yeah.
But we not talk about, at the end, everyone's chasing for the larger part of their life.
Yeah.
To get money, make money, because that's one of the fundamentals which has been taught to us, to get a better job, get a better paying job. But once you get to that level, what to do with the money is, again, like Pam highlighted, it's not taught. But I think you start with the education at the school level, not even at the college level now.
Yeah, I mean, I studied engineering. So all my life I studied, physics, chemistry, maths.
Yeah.
So I knew nothing about money. Only when I went to MBA, so business school, the first time I heard the concept of NPV, net present value of money. This is something that I didn't know up until I was like 26 or, whatever. So
and you went to one of the best schools in the country, I think. Which
so I went,
IIT Banaras.
I went to IIT, but my whole education was around physics, chemistry, maths, which I don't use today in my, I don't use in my daily life.
So applicability education has to increase.
Or at least have a much more holistic view of things, right?
Yeah. On the 0 to 1 of finance,
To 1 of finance, personal finance management, exactly. I mean, you said my personal finance management I feel is not great because I learned very late actually.
Yeah.
And still I feel that every time I look at it, it's like, why did I do this? I should have done that, and all of that. And there are other people who are much, much better at this. But I feel that, this is something that is not taught, obviously, because I came from a very, middle class and very service, class background. So my parents, they were not good at money management, or they also just figured it out, right? So whereas maybe if you come from a, what we call in India as business class, then maybe those people, they in their family talk about money a lot. Like in our family, we never talked about money.
Yeah.
Right? It was never a conversation. In our family, it was always about, beta ye pad lo, then you get this degree and then you get this, maybe you get this job. Even like, which job do you go for? Like after a point, the parents, they don't know. They don't know what to say. Like I'm sure you see this, right? Like why should someone do an ACA versus a CA in India, right? So, why did I choose to go to MBA in London versus, here, for example, right?
And you got into ISB back in
I got into ISB, and then at that time I was in the US and I thought maybe this is better.
Yeah.
So these things, then you have to sort of figure it out, and it's costly, and then I took a loan at that time.
One of the things which Lizzie told me was that there was a employee of yours, and they basically, I think, wrote a book to you or wrote a few words saying, and they spoke about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And obviously it turned out that he apologized very little later. But being a woman in finance, or just in business in the country, might be slightly more difficult. And because you've gone through so many lows, how have you dealt with failure across?
Yeah. And also, I think, in my personal life also, or professional life, I've gone through a lot of ups and downs. So when I graduated in 2000, I got a job offer, my first job in 2000, and then 2001, there were no jobs.
The dot-com bust.
The dot-com bust. So they had I had actually a job offer with Wipro, and I was supposed to join in Bangalore. But then they just kept deferring it. So I had to then, reapply, go through that. And then again, I saw the financial crisis, right in
You were at Merrill Lynch when this was happening.
I was, and on Wall Street. I was there. I was there. I was literally standing there when it happened. I mean, so I've seen all that. So imposter syndrome, I don't identify with it, actually. I think you have to be willing to learn.
Yeah.
I think everyone goes through knocks. I mean, obviously, we are going, we've seen...
It's a little harder knock than most.
We're harder knock than most. I think people around you help a lot. I think definitely in, bad times, you sort of see who your sort of true friends are. And I think then you should always remember that. So, that is one thing that I would say, even on a philosophical note or a personal note. But yeah, I think then you should also think about like what you what you want, what excites you. So personally, that has always helped me. That, you know, I've always thought about, okay, this obviously, you know, take some time, figure out, and then say, okay, what next and what excites me, you know, where do I go from here?
So where are you going from here now?
I don't know. I'm going through that journey where I'm thinking through, you know, what excites me, what are the things that are happening. So yeah, at the moment I'm just speaking to a lot of people and
Just figuring it out. Is that
figuring it out.
more in stealth now?
More in stealth mode, and also a little bit of mentorships, and a lot of people, you know, reach out and helping a few folks through some, you know, fundraising or business plan and things like that. So yeah, that always helps because you know, learn about something new. So for me, so learning about something new has always helped, and in a way that has also helped me change. Like I've had so many pivots in my life, in my career.
Yeah.
So those pivots have come because of this. That every time I was like, okay, you know, ye ho gaya, ab now what?
Now what?
You know?
But yeah, this is superb. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
this.
you.
Yeah, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And yeah, I mean, we'll see you down the road doing something new, something different, something more revolutionizing.
Well, I hope so. Let's see. Fingers crossed. But thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed myself. Yeah, this is my first podcast. Yeah, so I was a bit nervous coming in, but thank you.
No worries.
Thank you so much. Yeah.